I'd like to bring the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Alderman Spencer if he'd be so kind to do the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things. Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, but I would entertain a motion to add another topic. And the other topic is the legislative proposal that we have to send off to Raleigh. I realize that it came to the manager and myself as individual requests, but the board did not prioritize anything of those requests. So I thought at the end we'd have a short discussion about what things we want to prioritize, as opposed to me just deciding on my own to do that. So I would entertain that motion.
So moved.
Is there a second? There's a motion on the floor. There's a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. So I will now entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve agenda
As amended. Second. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. So for the people here in the building and for the people at home, the reason for this workshop is that there was an ad hoc committee put together of Alderman Carroll, Alderman Lay, and myself to look at different policies and procedures that would govern how the meetings are run and how it would govern other actions that the Board of Aldermen take. And rather than waiting to the very end and having some list that probably will never end, I decided that we should have a workshop to discuss where we are right now, to get the feel of the whole board about going forward with some of these issues. Some of them I think we could actually vote on today, and some of them are for food for thought on future things. So that's why we're having the meeting.
Can I ask a question? Can we vote?
You're actually correct.
Well, the only reason why we don't work in a workshop or vote during a workshop is because we've chosen not to in the past. We can legally vote if we choose to do so.
Decision by the previous board to do that. We don't have any public comment on this agenda. The public has had the opportunity to see this agenda and know that they don't have public comment, so I think it's a mistake to vote on anything today in a workshop. And maybe this is a policy that we need to talk about today. Are we going to vote in workshops?
You make a good point in the fact. I'm sorry. You make a good point in the fact that if we're going to vote in a workshop, we probably should advertise it in that regards, and that was not done for this particular workshop. So we can have the discussion. People can feel out where the board is on different topics, and I'm going to take it up further with the manager whether or not we can do it at the next meeting if there's enough time to do that, as opposed to having a 16-hour Alderman meeting next time.
Just as a side note, we might think about voting during workshops as we move forward, or at least advertising it so that we can.
No, I think that's the first question I would tend to think of is to put it here. We'll have that discussion today about moving forward for a vote on that at the next meeting that we have a vote on this, if that makes sense. Okay. And then, yes, sir, we would then advertise each one after that. Whether we vote or not, we would have it at least on the record that we could do that. Is it-
To be clear, we're going to make a decision on voting at workshops at our next regular meeting?
That
A
all
week from
depends on
now?
how long the next regular meeting is going to be. It'll be at the next time that we can find a time to go do it. Even if it means another special meeting sometime, then we'll do that. But it'll be relatively soon because a number of these things should be moving along. Okay? Any other discussion on that right now? Okay. All right. So the first agenda item is UDO changes in processes. From my perspective, and I'll of course open it up to Robert and Frank to also join into that thing, is that I had two things in mind when we put this on the agenda. One was the process that's in, I guess it's the UDO, it's in our package, of who can make a request for a UDO change and how that all works, and just to review that and see if that's where we still want to be. And two, to start the discussion that we've all had conversations about potential UDO changes. I'm not sure what the planning board is working on for UDO changes. I'm not sure what the staff is working on for UDO changes. But I do know that before Travis left, he claimed that he had a list of some length of UDO changes, or UDO issues that he wanted to have reviewed. So we keep talking about it, but we don't actually bring it to a conclusion. So I wanted this meeting to be the first meeting to have that, where we can kind of set a date to bring our stuff together, if that makes sense. So Frank, did you have any comment about what I just said about the reason for that item? Your microphone?
No, I agree with what you said. There are a bunch of things we need to look at, things that have been brought up, things that we've talked about, possibly a modifying, changing and whatnot, the conversations that you, Robert, and I had. A lot of things we can just put out there and then, take a look at them and go from there.
Alderman Carroll?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any comments except that, often perhaps we as individual aldermen or even staff or the planning board could essentially be working on the same thing and the other two not know it. So if y'all are working on backyard chickens, I just want you to know I'm also working on it. But that could be the case sometimes.
I have a whole bunch of ideas about things that I would like us to talk about for UDO changes based on things that we have heard, issues that have come up in 4 years before now, both on developments, on problems that people have brought to us that we really need something clear in the UDO, or that very clearly the UDO does not properly address. I can think of about 5 examples where we were pretty much tied to what the UDO said, but the general feeling of the board was we wish we didn't have to vote this way. So I would suggest that we set a special meeting where any changes that we're thinking about or would like the rest of the board to talk about and think about, and put together a list, kind of like our goals list.
Go ahead.
But I understand that you're also bringing up the issue of what is the actual process? Suppose we verbalize what we would like to see or like to consider, then what? Does it land with a thud? Does it automatically go to the planning board? Does the planning board have to then be tasked with dealing with each one of these? Or can they choose what they want to, what they think is important or less, they can prioritize or not? I don't know what that process is, but I bet Karen does.
Well, I have what I think I know. So the whole text UDO conversation is multi-layered. Staff, makes recommendations for changes. Individual people come to submit an application to make changes. But it goes to the planning board because it doesn't, the discussion needs to initiate in the planning board, not at our board. And I agree with Alderman Davis that we probably all have some opinions about things. When we send something to the planning board, we are tasking them to review that, to participate in that conversation and give us back some kind of analysis. I don't think that, I think it is unproductive on our part with all that we have to, if I'm hearing what you said right, Rich, that we are, the board, that staff would bring everything to us first. I think that's very unproductive, and I think that's not really the process.
I'm actually looking at that as the reverse, where we would discuss together things that we would like to see considered as possible changes, and then ask the planning board to look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly, because we interact with people all around town, so I think that's certainly a good idea. And I think from time to time, as things come up here in public comment and stuff, we do that. But if you want to have like a formalized workshop where we individually go through the UDO and...
No, just go through things that have come up that we've noticed, and that we might want to discuss among is this important enough, or is this something with significant impact sufficiently to ask the planning board to look at it? In other words, another workshop.
I can certainly
So Karen,
embrace that.
You were correct in your assessment of what I said. Okay. And so I will explain that in just a minute, a little more in depth. But I don't want to take up all the time talking, because my back is, when I'm looking at them, my back is to you.
I think, to Alderman Mosteller's point, things go to the planning board before they come before us for a reason with a recommendation. Whether or not we go with that recommendation is a different story. But I think that we saw that example just yesterday with the Friends of Franklin. While they did a beautiful presentation and they have great intentions, and I think that we all agree that that's something that we want to move forward with in some way as soon as possible, we had to refer it back to the planning board in order to kind of suss that out a little bit more before it comes back to us. So I think that that kind of process needs to continue, and I think that there's value in the amount of time and attention that the planning board is able to give to some of those issues, that we have other things that come before us that we might not have that kind of time and attention for one issue, unless we end up doing subcommittees on things over and over again, which is not a bad thing. I'm not against subcommittees.
How then would you recommend that if one of us, let's say me, sees something that or Alderman Carroll, sees something that we would really like to have the planning board look at as a possible improvement to the UDO? Are we then unable to do that?
No,
Does the planning board have to spontaneously combust and decide to do this?
I think some of the...
I was just going to say, I agree with your idea. Maybe we do a workshop that we bring our ideas, and that if we have them, and then we can agree as a board to send on to them, maybe. Is that what you think?
Yeah.
Alderman
I want to
Mosteller.
overtask the planning board. I expect they have plenty to do. But at the same time, the last time we updated the UDO was 4 years ago, and we certainly will be looking at it again after the comprehensive plan is done. But things have emerged, and the future is chasing us at this point.
I think
Frank,
One
go ahead.
question, Alderman Mosteller. Are we saying that somebody has something they think needs some work on it, should we all as a group agree to send it to the planning board, or is that something we need to vote on, or is that something that just one person can work on and then move it along?
Well, I think that's for us to decide. Typically, we as a board would do that only because of consensus. So you don't have duplication, to Robert's point, that we would all come together. That's why I think we've never really done what Lotus said, where we've had a workshop where we've sort of looked at the things that have come across our table and discussed it as a board, that maybe these are board ideas about it. I mean, staff is tasked with that, and truthfully, I don't know if we send it to staff first, and then they take what they need to the planning board to consider it. That's probably the real process.
Well, I think, hold on, Lo. I would throw out for consideration that this is something that the ad hoc committee would put together. So does each one of us, 7 people, do we each individually start sending stuff to the planning board? That there's no written policy that I know of that says we can or could not do that. Perhaps that's something we need to add to the list of things to look at so that we keep it in my original thought for bringing this up was the fact that I have no handle on how much staff time, if 15 people from the citizens walk in and they all have 15 text amendments they want, do they automatically get a full staff review on them before it goes to the planning board to come back to us for something? I don't know, if we're not being buried by that stuff, then the system we have might be working fine. But if we are getting buried with that stuff because we have a few other projects on the books there, how do we manage that? Now that was the first part of my discussion, is how do we manage that everybody in the world can come in here and ask for something, and staff has to do it, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the planning board has 90 days to turn it around. I think that's the timeline on it, something like that, unless they ask for an extension and both sides agree to the extension, which is not really clear in this document about, it says you have to do it in 90 days. I didn't see any, in the package that we got today, I didn't see anything where you have the option of an extension, though we've done that. I know we've done that. So I'm looking for some more clarity into that kind of discussion first. I truly agree with, we need to have a separate workshop just on UDO stuff. We send it all in writing first to the manager. We all get everybody's wishes on the sheet of paper so that we're not sitting in here trying to comprehend what your thought is, and then we can prioritize and decide as a group, if that's what we decide to do. The group, 4 people, have to decide to move it forward to the next step. So that's kind of where my thoughts are, but obviously it's a board decision.
I think one of the other things that came out of the conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why we had the conversation was a lot of wheels could be spinning through the process, wasting time for really, something that may never go anywhere. And so how do you pick and choose what that looks like? I don't know the answer to that, but
Can you give an example of that?
Staff does that, I think, and makes, staff would do that, would distill it down of things that were, really staff kind of prioritizes just, yeah, I'm sorry.
I think Maureen is the one who can answer, is her office getting bombarded?
Good morning. I would say that we're not getting bombarded per se, but I would say that every text amendment or map amendment, except for conditional zoning and the driveway request from the Board of Adjustment, were all applicant requests. So there were about 8 in the last year that have come through. So staff has to review them, look at the ordinances, consider consistency with the land use plan, and then bring a staff report to the planning board.
So my thought, and it may not be a good thought, and it is counter to what Alderman Mosteller said, is that if somebody comes in with a piece of paper, you're obligated to do a full review on it, even if it's a crazy idea, and none of us are ever going to vote on it. So I was just trying to figure out how, and I don't know the answer to my question, how do we reduce that workload? But if you've only got 8 in the year, then maybe I'm asking for something that doesn't need to be worked on. So you've answered my first question now. So unless I'm missing something, I guess the next part is we set a date for, we ask the manager to go and find a mutual date. We don't have to do it today, that we can come in, but I would really like it that everybody's ideas are sent in first so that we can digest them and look at them and see what that is. And I would actually like to know if the planning board has any things that's bubbling up in their minds. Let's throw it all in the same package and see what that looks like.
Well, they're constantly doing that. That's their process. If something occurs and they come across something, Mo, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the process now, that the planning board would talk to you about something that they see is a need. So
Well,
that is going on.
So my next thought is, so the planning board has an idea they want to do something, and they give it to the planning section of the city government to do that. At that point, should we get a note that just says they're doing that? Just so we can start looking at the issue as well.
Well, I think that confuses it because staff, depending on what staff gives them back, it may never come to us, or it may come to us in a different form. That's what you don't, the information, until it gets to a certain level, then it's really not a conversation. You know what I'm saying? It becomes, well, you said, so we get this, and then planning board has their discussion about it, then we've looked at it over here and they've synthesized it to something else. To me, it causes more confusion. It comes to us when it comes to us from them, when it's ready for us to have to have enough information to have a consideration, for lack of a better way to say that. Is Mo, but
I'm hearing you, yeah. Go ahead, Frank.
Mike. I think what you're saying is that goes to the staff, planning board, they kind of thin it out, they determine whether it's valid or not. They kind of remove all the flack or whatever it is, and it comes to us as something that's pretty concise. It's stripped away from all the stuff we don't need, and then we go with it from there. And we either say yay or nay.
And part of that, Frank, is that they have a public participation in all that conversation and everything. So it distills it down before it comes to us, so we're not looking at things that are not going to be in it, for lack of a better way to say it.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with you.
It's, what I'm seeing here is multiple avenues and issues. First, there are the actual applicants, let's say a subdivision applicant, or a PUD applicant. That goes first to staff. Staff deals with it, and then it ultimately gets to the planning board, and the planning board deals with it, and then the planning board makes a recommendation to us. Then what we've been discussing is twofold. People from the public coming before us and asking us literally to make a decision that conflicts with what the UDO has. And we've seen that multiple times. And then what I'm hoping we can do is, how do we, as 7 people, get our ideas for UDO changes and recommendations, which we would do in that workshop, as you suggested. So we've got the actual applicants. Then we have people in the public who have an issue that turns out to be something that would require a UDO change. And then there's our ideas. And I've got 2, and I've been talking about them for 3 years. And so far, the process has not roiled around to the point where we're actually sending it to the planning board. But Travis did say both of them were good ideas.
Well, there you go.
I'm invoking Travis now.
So
So am I correct? I mean, we're dealing with 3 separate processes.
You're correct. So
Okay.
I'm going to try to eliminate a couple of them right now so we can distill it on and move on to the next topic. I'm sensing that the process that we have now of the citizens bringing it in, the planning board coming up with their own decisions, and how that part of it works, the board is okay with the way it's working now. Is that what I'm sensing that the way the system works now for either citizens or developers to come to the staff and then to the planning board, or the planning board having their own ideas, and how that system is working now is sufficient for the board, for this board. And if that is the case, then there's no sense beating this horse any further. The next, I'm looking at you, Mark.
Really, the one thing I'm thinking the whole time, especially as Alderman Davis, is that I want a roadmap. If we're doing the UDO, the planning board, like you're saying, the three, let's draw out a roadmap of the processes that you have to, we go through, they go through, citizens go through, and lay it out clearly. Yeah, yes, sir, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, the one little provision that I should say I would like somebody to look into is adding the sentence in there that if agreed upon, continuances by the planning board can be made. We did that for Indigo. Indigo, when we were doing when the city was doing the Indigo project, it took more time for the planning board, and the city asked for continuances, and the developer said yes. Well, I'm not confident, at least not from what I have in my hand to me, that actually is a stated thing that you can actually do. Ask for a continuance, and on either side, is there some written document that says that you can do that?
There is not. The provision says 90 days, and I think that the statute does not require the 90 days. The UDO does, so I believe that the board at that time was able to make the decision to allow that to happen, so it was over to supersede it.
So in our UDO discussion about changes to the UDO, we could add that sentence in there that says we can do that. Otherwise, we are violating, or the planning board is violating the UDO, even if it's for the good of everything. So I just throw that out for that. So now,
That can come out in the workshop.
that's what I meant. That's where it can come out. So the next idea is that I would ask the manager to solicit from all of us dates that are, a couple of weeks down the road, to find out when a mutual time and date can be made, and then we can find a room, so we don't have to put a tent up outside, to have a workshop. And everybody brings their stuff with them, and they've already sent it to the manager so that we can all digest it. Does that sound like a reasonable idea to move forward? Since we can't vote, a little nod of your head would be fine.
Yeah,
That can be consensus.
yeah,
Yes,
one of the
yeah.
conversations that I would suggest we have is maybe creating I don't know if we do it twice a year or once a year, but a regular workshop on potential changes or new ordinances or whatever it may be. We just the board hosts that on an annual basis or biannual. I don't know.
No, I like your idea, because we've been talking about getting together since you and I were elected, and we've never done it, just because inaction on our part, all of our parts. So it would force us to do it if we had at least once a year. We had the annual April, May, well, we don't want to do it during budget season, but some period where we know that's going to be an agenda item.
I think we need that.
Just for UDO, just to have the UDO discussion.
I think we need that. Stuff comes up, things change. We need to take a look at them. Because if not, they're just going to sit out there and fester. So they need to come to us. We need to thin them out, look at them, and determine what's going to happen. What are we going to do with it?
We already have something like that in the books for ethics review. We voted on that every February, something, I can't remember what the date was. we were supposed to have a review of the ethics policy so everybody understands what the current rules are for all of those things. And so this would be just another one of those topics. It could be the same month or whatever. I'd like to say during a slow month, but I'm not sure what month that might be. But I'm going to leave that to the manager to help us guide us on that issue as to when we can meet on that.
Should we include the code of ordinance in the conversation?
Why not?
Okay.
What's the downside?
What, Miss Bonnie?
That is a long, long meeting. Wow.
Almost maybe it should be separate.
If we had, remember, everybody's got to send their stuff in early. If we find out that that list is really long, it will not be one meeting. We can break it in pieces. We can do UDO one day and code the other day. We can break it any way we want to, but as long as we have all the stuff in beforehand, we can judge the length of the meeting by doing that.
If we're going to do code of ordinances, can we have more than 2 weeks before the meeting? I'm just saying, because that's a whole nother kettle of fish.
I mean, the other thing you can do is actually do a retreat. I mean, where it's a weekend thing. I mean, lots of elected official bodies do that. They'll, have it for an entire weekend or whatever, and it's a bonding experience too.
Lo, can we have pizza added, though? Can we have pizza added, please? I think that those are all good ideas. So how about we leave it to the manager to mull it over in her head, come back to us about whether it's a meeting or a retreat, but we've resolved that the process we have now for the planning board and citizens is okay, and our next agenda is to try to look at the UDO changes that we all might have in our heads. Is there any other discussion on this topic? Thank you very much. Let's go on to the next topic then, which is public comment on rules and procedures. So again, these came out of discussions that Alderman Lay, Alderman Carroll, and myself had, and I wanted to make sure that we're going down the right path. And since we're not going to vote today, we'll look at another date, but we'll have a discussion now to kind of knock it out because it's a relatively short agenda. So let's just jump right into the, okay.
Do you want to, we're going to discuss what we came up with specifically as it relates to time limit on public comment, and also, okay, do you want me to talk about it a little bit? Or are you going to?
Be my guest.
Okay. So what we came up with during that, that rules and procedures meeting was essentially having come out of meetings that lasted past 11 o'clock, we recognized that we need to put some rails on both public comment and the length of individual public comment and the length of the overall public comment, and also time limit on the meeting itself. So we've got staff here until late at night. Essentially what we came up with during that meeting was a 3-minute per person time frame. So you'd have a hard stop at 3 minutes during your public comment, and then public comment the entirety of public comment would be set at 1 hour. And the meetings, unless voted on to extend the time frame, would stop at 10 o'clock. So, but with a majority vote, we could extend the meeting later if need be. Is that right?
Yes, that's what we've discussed. I've actually reconsidered one of those points and not bring that up, but that's exactly what unless Frank, you have a different recollection.
No, that's correct. Robert's analysis was right on point. That's exactly what we talked about.
So my caveat to that is, as I thought about the meeting of Jabbertown Road and the 441 acres, there are 26 speakers. They were given an unlimited amount of time to talk, each one of them. And I think that we have to, I agree with a time limit on each speaker. The thing that I've struggled with is the 1 hour. Because in that meeting, even if there was 26 speakers, even if you gave them 3 minutes each, it's more than an hour. And the topic was of value, certainly of value to the citizens, and to tell the person at the 59th minute you're not going to be able to stand up and talk about something that you've sat here all night to talk about, I think would be not in the best interest of the city. That's just my personal thought. And if we hold them to a time limit, and right now it's 3 minutes, we let everybody speak. Another discussion point that Alderman Lay brought up is that the School of Government allows, or not allows, they say you can do, I think that's the right words, that you can take a group of people and say you have to have a spokesman. I personally am against that idea as well, because if Rich Alt was picked the spokesman and Robert Carroll is on the same topic, but he has a slightly different twist to it, how he thinks he can convince the legislators to do something, and he's not allowed to speak, I don't think that this group of people who gets together on that night can elect somebody that quickly to speak for them. So I personally am against the one speaker on one topic, and I'm against, as they do in some places, where you can yield the time and one person just dabbles on for an hours and a half because they want to tell me about their lineage or something.
So one of the things we also discussed regarding public comment is that if you want to speak, you must sign up. So no more of the, no more of that, which I think is a very reasonable request.
That's simple to do. I mean, we got the sheet out here. All you got to do is just, take the time to sign up. That way we know who we've got and we can move the process along quicker. If we got people just raising their hand, then that just adds time, and so I'm totally against that. But everything else, particularly the part where it said elect a spokesman, how are they going to gather up somewhere and have a huddle and do it? That's totally unreasonable. We can't do that.
I think we can help educate the public by not only talking about it, but also, well, the whiteboard. I'm going to steal an idea from Oak Island. When you walk into an Oak Island meeting, what's going to happen in that meeting is on their TV screens, and it just rolls through it. We could have it up there every meeting in the beginning that says, if you plan to have public comment, go sign up. All right, in great big letters.
And I think that a lot of the public don't realize that sign-in sheet is for public comment. I don't know if there's a way we can mark that better so people realize that it's not just a sign-in sheet. I was guilty of that myself when I first started coming to meetings, where I signed up thinking, okay, they need to know who's here. So I think that, I don't know if there's another sign that can go with that or what we can do for that, just that,
We can have Sarah, our new city clerk, be the one who decides on the best way to advertise that.
And then I agree that the 1 hour time limit staunches the public's ability to speak to us. I think the 3 minute time limit makes a whole lot of sense. And then I think there's power in seeing the number of people who feel passionately enough about a subject to come talk to us. So I think that I agree that having them elect a speaker doesn't make sense. So that's where I am on those things. And I love the ability to stop the meeting, and unless we are in the midst of a topic that we can finish and say, okay, we have the ability to go further and finish this, but we might need coffee at that point in the evening.
I'm very passionate about this. Quick history. In 2019, 4 people were elected. Mayor Hayden, and I was one of the 3 new aldermen. One of the reasons we were elected, there were a number of issues, but the heart of the issue was that the public did not feel heard. And they weren't heard because of the way the meetings were structured and because there was a 3-minute time limit. And I was a frequent speaker in the year or so before that, and I will never forget the sound of that bell dinging in my ear at exactly the 3-minute mark and in the middle of a sentence. And this is even after I'd written things out, said them out loud. My dogs approved, they listened attentively, but I knew where the 3-minute mark was, but either I took a long breath or something, and bam, that was it. And not just to me, every single person who got up was dinged and gavelled down at 3 minutes. Inclusion is part of what we were elected for. Frankly, we were elected to listen to people. We are here to represent the public. How do we know what the public wants if we will only listen to them to the limit of our short attention span? Okay, let's talk about perception and reality. We have had 2 very long meetings, but they are not long because of public comment. December the 14th, which I believe was somewhat unique, was a 3-hour and 59-minute meeting. Okay, 4 hours. The public comments, now I've gone back through all of these meetings and I have gone through and marked exactly the minute time that someone started to speak and the moment at which they ceased to speak. Public comments on December the 14th amounted to 42 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay. The number one topic was people speaking in favor of their choice for the new alderman to replace Alderman Alt when he became the mayor. First runner-up was Jabbertown Road, because that was also the first time this was on the agenda. The longest speaker was the woman who had bought a property on Yopon Road and wanted us to pave that. And that was a 9-minute, and she was reading from a whole lot of documents and so forth. But that meeting, December the 14th, 3 hours and 59 minutes from the moment it was gavelled in to the moment we adjourned. So if you're eliminating it to 4 hours, you've already got there. All right. Then the next longest meeting that is, I think, seared into our memories is the one for February the 8th, our last regular public meeting here. And that was a meeting that lasted 4 hours and 50 minutes. We were not out of here until a few minutes after 11. We had a closed session as part of that. In that meeting, public comment lasted for 49 minutes and 15 seconds. What are we trying to accomplish here by shutting down public comment? Okay, in that last meeting, there was one person who spoke as a tribute to Joe Medlin. 11 people spoke about the 441 acres. 7 people spoke about Jabbertown Road. One person talked about an easement. One person talked about the old county courthouse / city hall. 2 people talked about conditional zoning. One person talked about trees, and 2 people talked about ethics. This is how the time broke down. 12 people spoke for less than 3 minutes. Yay. 6 people spoke between 3 minutes and 4 minutes. 3 people spoke between 4 minutes and 5. 4 people spoke between 5 and 9. And the longest speaker ended right at 9 minutes. and that was someone speaking on the 441 acres. 49 minutes and 15 seconds. Really, we're going to stop people from saying what they have to say? What else do we have more important to do on any night other than listen to the public? So, perception, long meeting. But why are the meetings long? Oh, right. Let's look at December the 14th. What did we have to do? We recognized the departing mayor and aldermen. We swore in 4 people. We then nominated and had discussion and voted on a new alderman. We had a very long special presentation by Everett Jones, the arborist for Franklin Square Park. We had a public hearing on the map amendment about Jabbertown Road. Now, that's not the sewer line, that's the development amendment. We had a long discussion on system development fees, and that was a public hearing. We talked about system development fees. This is on our agenda, regular agenda. We talked about request for public hearing on setback exceptions and encroachments. We had a request for a public hearing on driveways, and Mo talked to us about both the setbacks and the driveways. We chose a Rules and Procedures Committee. We did a budget transfer for Franklin Square Park money to pay for the arborist, for the work that the arborist recommended, and we appointed a comprehensive plan steering committee. This is December the 14th, for crying out loud. The meeting that, let's see, here it is. The meeting that only lasted 3 hours and 59 minutes. Okay. And then we had board comments. February the 8th, in addition to the 4 minutes and 15 seconds of public comment, we had quite a bit. We introduced new employees. We recognized Owen Gidlow. We did a proclamation in honor of Black History Month. We had an audit presentation that went pretty darn long, and in our agenda, it was almost 100 pages. We had the Jabbertown sewer line discussion. We had the text amendment decision on setbacks and encroachment exceptions. Driveways. We had a request for a public hearing on highway commercial. We had conditional zoning. That was an update and discussion. And then we had the discussion and the decision on the 441 acres. We had a clarification and details about the East-West Partners meeting, and we had a lengthy discussion about ethics and back and forth on that. And then we had a discussion about board comment time. No, actually, we took that off the agenda because we were running so long. And we had a closed session. Public comment is not the reason that we have long meetings. I think it's a great idea to say that we will end the meetings at 10 o'clock, or as close as we can get to that. We can always have another meeting, but what we should never do is limit the amount of time that people can talk. And keep in mind that most people would just about rather die than get up and talk in front of the public. They are nervous. Look at them. When they get to the podium, their hands are shaking, they're worried. I mean, some get up and talk all the time, but some are really, really nervous. But they are passionate. And some of them are redundant and repeat themselves even when they've written things out. let's be kind. In addition to let's being good stewards and be what we were elected to do, let's just be kind to people and give them a chance to say what they have to say. And let's also remember, they have to get up and then walk all the way to the podium with everybody looking at them by the time they get to the podium and figure out that they're supposed to press that button and everything else. They're already nervous. All eyes are on them. They get up there, they start to speak. More than 100 people are looking at them. We're looking at them, and they're trying to say their piece. Do we really want to be banging a gavel in their ear at 3 minutes? When very few people actually even talk longer than 3 minutes. I can talk more on this, but I think I've made my.
So my point is, actually, the other night, we had 26 people speak.
Yes.
At 2 minutes each. You're saying they spoke less than 2 minutes each. You said they spoke 49 minutes. 49 minutes is 52 minutes, is 2 minutes each. So
I'm sorry, I'm not. What?
We had 26 people speak, and I want all 26 people to speak.
Okay.
You said it took 49 minutes to do that.
And 15 seconds.
That's less than 2 minutes a person.
On the other hand, 6 did speak between 3 and 4 minutes. 3 spoke up to 5 minutes.
They spoke for almost 2 hours. That's
No,
what
they didn't.
That's what they spoke for. The
No,
problem
they
is
didn't.
that, Lo,
They spoke for less than an hour, considerably less than an hour. altogether.
mathematically, that couldn't have happened.
What?
Mathematically, that couldn't happen. But let's get off of that topic. The topic here is, it's a democracy. Sometimes you're going to win the vote, sometimes you're not going to win the vote, and we move on with the topic. We're not voting today at all, and you're going to have the opportunity to talk again when we do this again, to convince people that one way or the other. And since we're not voting today, I don't know what the vote will be to do it one way or the other. And I purposely have not asked those questions about that. The point of this whole meeting today is to give everybody, to have the conversation we're having. These are the things that the three of us have come up with, and we wanted to socialize that with everybody to start thinking about it so we don't walk into a meeting, ask for your vote when you didn't have time to digest it. So I applaud you for being passionate and doing and your speech, and that's the whole purpose of the meeting, is to get everybody to think through their vote before they do that.
And the vote be fact-based. Yes, in a long meeting, it seems like we heard people talk forever, but fact-based, no. It wasn't that long.
Okay.
And we did not have that many people talking for a long time.
Okay, Robert, go ahead.
So my only thing is, you know, we can pull ourselves together by picking a point of agreement, right? And so Lo agreed that 10 p.m. hard stop is, you're okay with that?
Yeah, but we can set something. By the way, you know, the county commissioners get beaten up all the time by people because if you want to speak to the county commissioners, the meeting starts at 6. You've got to get there by about 4:30 because they only hear the first 10 people on the sign-up sheet. And that infuriates people.
Which is not where this board has even considered going. This board, no one on this board that I've heard so far has said anything except everybody gets to speak. No appointed person. If it's 52 people that are going to speak that night, it's 52 people that are going to speak that night, and we'll be here. If you want to close it at 10, there's going to be items that are on the agenda that won't get heard unless we have a break and a vote to extend the meeting. We have that provision in there, that we could do that, because if somebody sat here, especially if it was a presenter, and they went through 4 hours and then we sent them home, I'm not sure that's the best business practice in the world.
I think that that your thoughts on the 1 hour are a really good compromise. So if we remove that from this conversation, everybody still gets to speak. We agree that 3 minutes is, for most people, enough time. And
Only by what's happened before. I do not think it's fair. It's just not fair to tell people they can only have a certain amount of time to speak. And what happens, I'm interrupting you, I'm sorry, but I mean, what happens if at 1 hour we still have people who haven't spoken?
They get to speak.
Do they?
That's what we just
Okay.
what we're saying is remove the 1 hour altogether, and then what we end up with is 3 minutes per person, so per speaker, a 10 p.m. hard stop unless we vote, have a majority vote to continue, and I would be more likely to vote yes if I had pizza.
I'll buy you some pizza.
And also, they must sign up, right? So I think that that's a very reasonable compromise.
And then no yielding time to the next person.
I do not, you still want to stick with that 3 minutes?
Well, we
So
got
that's
to
the-
give other people a chance to talk, please.
So the 3 minutes is really the sticker here. Everything else you can agree to.
Alderman Kelly.
I think that we see at other board meetings throughout the area that the 3 minutes is a fairly common timeline. The public has the opportunity to email us directly. They have the opportunity to give us handouts. We accepted handouts just yesterday from a member of the public to look through as they were going through things. I think that the public we are readily accessible. Our phone numbers are there, our email addresses are there. And for someone who's truly passionate about something to the point where they need to talk more, I know I personally met with representatives from Friends of Franklin. I've personally met one-on-one with people who are very passionate. So there was a background with those folks prior to them coming up and speaking at public comment. And I think their public comment is valuable. And I think that it's really important that the public gets to speak. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we've got guardrails on what we're doing and making sure that if they have signed up, they understand that it's the 3 minutes. And I know I can be long-winded sometimes, but if I know I've got 3 minutes, then I'm really getting down to the brass tacks of what I need to talk about, rather than me going through my entire history and how I got here and how my parents lived here. And that background is not something that I need to hear at public comment, but it would be great to go meet for somebody to have coffee and learn about that. That's a different animal, in my opinion.
Alderman Spencer.
So the one thing I see that's different, that has changed, is that we're doing 2 meetings. So these people are getting twice as much opportunity to get out and meet with us and voice their opinion. So I like the 3 minutes. I'm not against limiting it to an hour and a half. I'm not against limiting it to an hour, but I'll go with the consensus. And then that's the word that I want to make sure we say, and this might not be on topic, but we need to take advantage of the consent agenda. We're scared to pass anything without showing it to the people first. And I think we need to be a little bit more bold in making actions of the things we're responsible for doing, rather than people hearing about a contract for an internet service or whatever. So there's reasons why we're long-winded. We're scared of the consent agenda. But back to it, they've got 2 meetings. I like the 3 minutes. Duration is up to everyone, and I like the compromise.
Alderman Lay.
I think it's imperative that we hear from the public. We hear, they come in with a subject they want to talk about. They're very passionate about it. 3 minutes is an awful long time. That is a long, long time. Most people can get it into that 3 minutes. If it's a topic they need to go beyond it, maybe if they know we're dealing with a 3-minute thing, they can kind of put their thoughts together before we get here. But it's important that we hear what they've got. That's what we're here for. We are servants of the people. we've got to hear what they're saying. But again, 3 minutes is a long time.
Alderman Spencer?
Instead of saying 10 o'clock, I'd like to say 4 hours, because you have the morning meeting. 4 hours for a meeting. After that, we can move forward. It's up to you, just a suggestion.
And before any of this actually got to this board, today's meeting, before any of these ideas got to this board, the School of Government's suggestions were reviewed. And everything that's been mentioned so far is clearly within their writings about how meetings can be held. And it is consistent with the surrounding jurisdictions. So unless there's something new on this topic, I think there's a lot for us to think about, to get prepared for the next round when we actually have this next discussion. And then eventually we'll have to take a vote on it. But Robert, do you have one more thing?
I do. I just wanted to, I apologize for not hearing all of your comments, but the consent agenda I agree with completely. I think there are opportunities for us to put things there. We're not hiding anything. It's on the agenda. If someone wants to speak about it in advance, they can. I just think that would be a great opportunity for us to move some things through that don't need the discussion.
I concur with you on both of you on that idea. The only thing is I do like the way that the past board has handled some of that, is that the mayor at that point would then give a short blip right up front. This consent agenda items in reference to X, Y, and Z. And so that people would have that information.
And it gives the board an opportunity at that time to decide whether or not to pull it out.
Correct.
If anyone feels
the board has the opportunity from the Friday before, but sometimes, based on our lives, we don't get to read the stuff until that night. And so, yes, you'd have one more opportunity to say, and we have. We've done that multiple times. We pulled something from the consent agenda, stuck it on the agenda because we thought it needed more socialization. And everybody has that opportunity.
I just want to say, I just want to throw this out here, that a 4-hour meeting is a really long meeting to stay productive. Just want to say that. If we could look to try to limit them more to 3 hours, even if we have to schedule another meeting, whether it's a workshop meeting for items or something, I think, just speaking for myself personally, by the time I'm at near the end of the 3rd hour going into the 4th hour, it's, you know, I'm not sure that I'm as sharp as I would like myself to be. I'm just saying. And
Breaks, more breaks.
Let me add one thing to what Alderman Mosdell was saying. In my old life, I used to say the mind can absorb only what the rear end can handle. I mean, if you're there 4 hours, I mean, you're worn out and you're not hearing anything. I mean, it's not there.
Frank, I think we should sit on those chairs.
I once had worked at a very large newspaper, and the executive editor was quite fed up with all the long meetings. So we went in one morning for our morning news budget meeting, and there were no chairs except for his. And that was it. That was a quick meeting.
That actually is the Japanese business model. They've been doing that for decades. All of their meetings are 1 hour, and you stand for it. Yeah. So with that, I'd like to move on to Agenda E3, which is the role of board liaisons. And again, this is just to get our brains moving as to what we want the board liaisons to do, or any of these topics to do. So the Alderman Carroll, Alderman Lay, and myself talked about this at some length, and some ideas popped up, and we wanted to socialize them with the entire board. One of them is if you're assigned as a liaison, and you have agreed to do that, if you go to a meeting, should we give you a template to fill out that you give back to the board as a whole through the manager's office, and then she sends it out to all of us, that says these are the key points. There may not have been any key points, but if there were key points, if a whole new development came in and it was going to be, I'm just using the planning board as an example, and there was a whole brand new thing there going on, and it's subjective. I understand what I'm saying is subjective, and there's no way to really, I think, really put it into words. You just know it's kind of like, this is a big issue. And you want to, we should the liaisons then forward it to the rest of the board that there's kind of a big issue going on. You may want to like zoom in on these meetings and just see what's going on. And so that was one of the topics that we had. In the package we got, and I have to admit, that was the first time I actually read that line there, it says that a liaison has all the ability to do whatever they want except for vote and something else. I can't remember what the other something else was. But that actually allows the liaison to talk at any time they want to, whether it's in the big meeting or in the workshop meetings. If that's what we want them to do, then we should continue with that line. The issue is that we have is using the one that the workshops that the board, the planning board does. The planning board has workshops, appropriately so, I'm not suggesting they don't have them, that deal directly with developers. And now we're putting aldermen in the position of dealing with developers, and that's been going on since Hector was a pup here. And so for planning board, that's 2 aldermen that are having regular conversations with developers outside of the purview of everybody else that's on the board. And I've experienced that by going to some of the workshops as the third wheel, and that always struck me as an issue, is that I'm not trying to stop them from doing that necessarily. I'm just trying to figure out, how does the rest of the board know that you've been in a meeting where you're dealing with the developers as they're trying to figure out what their development's going to look like, and you have firsthand knowledge with them. Go ahead.
The liaison stuff, the liaison conversation about participating in meetings, I don't believe, I printed off the code of ordinances for the planning board and the board of adjustment. They don't have that same language, I don't think, and it's not in the UDO that way. So I'm not sure, Rich. These are all like, this is what you've got in here is Parks and Rec and historic preservation, forestry. Planning board is not, I don't believe planning board has that same.
Right here it says, well, this is forestry, that's true.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So my question is, if it's for forestry, why do we have one for one group and one for another group?
Those committees are substantially different types of committees. That it has always been in forestry that was not a new addition, so because you're participating, but you don't vote.
But aldermen participate. I don't see them participating in the big meetings, but I see them participating in the workshops. Robert, go ahead.
I'm sorry, maybe we could take this one at a time and just go back to the first one. Well, no. So one of the things that we talked about with regards to that first topic was, how do we get back a more uniformed notification and in what time frame? So what we suggested was that we have some kind of uniform document that every alderman has. You can choose to use it or not use it, but there's an expectation that the information that is requested be provided, and you have 7 days, was part of the conversation, from the date of the meeting to get it back to the rest of the board. And so whether you're on HPC or forestry or beautification, essentially taking minutes in a reduced form and then providing that to the board within 7 days. Is that something we want to do?
That would be in writing?
Yeah, we would suggest that it be in writing. You could get it you could disseminate it through email or.
I feel like minutes is too much. We've got people in the meetings taking minutes. Perhaps highlights would be a better way to say that. And I mean, and to Mayor Alt's point, in some meetings, there aren't really things that are like, okay, this needs to go back to the larger board right now because it's at the very beginning stages of a conversation. Then it's like, well, they are just now starting. We might have something come months from now, 6 months, 8 months from now.
I think part of the reason why this came up is there was maybe in the past there'd been no real understanding of what some of the boards were doing or what was coming in front of this board, what was kind of like in the pipeline, and what could you get a better understanding of if you showed up to a planning board meeting or showed up to an HPC meeting. So how do you get that information? Because some people bring it back to the meeting during their board comments or during their reports, committee reports. So that's happening sometimes, but not consistently and not with everybody. So how do we create a more consistent, feedback opportunity? And if you go into a meeting, like, the HPC had one of their shortest meetings ever last month. And so I think we were all in at less than 10 minutes, and that was including a little BSing. So I think that, so what would I say about that? It would be short and sweet, but just a way to get information back to the entire board in a timely manner, I think is what we're trying to accomplish. Unless the board doesn't want that. If the board's good seeing that in the, committee reports at the end of the meeting, great.
It seems to me that the issue of reports and knowing what's going on would be accomplished if we required that the minutes of every board or committee be made available to the board before the board's next regular meeting. Now, that's usually going to be before the minutes are approved. For example, I'm thinking about Parks and Recreation, which meets on the third Tuesday. So that skips over our meetings. And the minutes would not be accepted until the next meeting of Parks and Recreation, so we wouldn't even see it for 2 months. So if even the unapproved but rough draft minutes submitted by the secretary of each of the boards and committees could come to us so that we at least see a rough draft of what's being worked on. But, we have dramatically different boards and committees. We've got quasi-judicial ones, we've got advisory ones, we've got the ABC board, which is kind of its own animal, and then the 4th of July committee. So I will say that I've been on liaison to 2 committees, and it does take a lot of reminding that minutes must be taken.
So one of the questions I have for you is that the public elected us to ride herd over the whole thing, where we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure things are working correctly. That doesn't mean we get into the weeds of the staff, that's the manager's job. But this board maketh and taketh away all committees. If a committee is not working correctly, I don't want to read about it in the social media. I want to hear it from the person who's in that meeting to find out why. And so we have the ability to go back to the committee and say, not for nothing, but we got to tighten this up a little bit, because we can do that.
Can we call it
Are you
highlights
talking
then?
about committees or boards? Some of the boards are mandated by state law.
Not the people. not the people. Not the people.
So one of the, I mean, we could dumb this down to what are the roles of a liaison. So if not to report back to the board in a timely manner, then what is the role?
I think one of the roles is to advise the committee and the board on what the Board of Aldermen are expecting, such as minutes, or if the board is working on a change in an ordinance that would affect the board, that we let the board know, or the committee know.
I think it's important that
We're a conduit.
I think it's important that we know what exactly the role of the liaison is. What is it we're supposed to do? I was at one of the boards that I sit in on, and I just made an offhand comment to one of the people on the board. In essence, what I was told was, hush. You're here to listen. You're not here to take part in discussion. I wasn't intended to take part in discussion. I just made an offhand comment. And the chairman said, hush. And not exactly those words, but that's what he said.
Alderman Spencer?
So I figured y'all did this because of me.
No, not at all.
Cemetery Committee, it's a new committee. They were asking for direction. And so actually last cemetery committee, we had some sickness and some things, and we didn't have the clerk and public person, and I ended up running the meeting. I probably shouldn't have, but I did, because I wasn't going to sit and waste a meeting. They showed up. I feel an obligation that we're going to do something. And one of the ladies said, what do we do? What do we do? And she's on beautification. I say, do you ask us to make something nice, or do you go out and make it nice? And so I basically told them, go find it, come back and let me know what you're thinking. So I took a personal liberty because they were looking at me, and they showed up. So at times you just do the best you can, but I don't try to force my personal opinion because I don't have that authority. But if y'all don't give it to me, I'm going to go back and I'm going to empower them the best I can and say, here, we're going to do something. And I'm going to show them this is going to be the best committee somehow. But again, it's not an old committee, so we haven't established rules. Maybe we need the general policy for a liaison, even though each role is different on each board. So again, I figured y'all were doing this for me to educate me.
No, Mark, I open my mouth way too much. So in HPC, as the liaison to that board, I know more than most people on that board. I don't know more than staff, and I don't know more than, 2 other members on this board. Because we worked on that together.
We three were the
Yes.
ad hoc committee that created or came
To the HPC. So
recommended way to set it up.
So I do, speak. I do talk. I have said, stay away from color. SHPO says that. So we don't want to dictate color. So I think that there is an opportunity for us to participate in the conversation, which I think is important. But then, we move out, you move that out. Well, what if we end up with, 2 other aldermen there? Do they not get the same opportunity? Because they're not the liaison. But maybe they have something just as valuable to add to the...
The only mathematical issue with that is that if there's 3 of you and you haven't announced it, you can't talk, which is what happens in the planning board. There could be, all of us could be sitting in that room, but we're not allowed to talk. To refine your statement is if there's only 1 liaison and a second alderman shows up, and I've been in that same position, you need to keep your mouth shut. So the question is, if a liaison person's allowed to speak and do whatever they want to, is the second alderman allowed to throw out a comment or a suggestion or something along the line? I'm just saying I would like us all to think about that So we don't have to make it, if there's two in like planning board, the third person couldn't speak because, not because of this, our internal rule, but because of the open meeting rule. We didn't announce it that way. Though I'm not sure how that works because the planning board meetings are announced, but not announced that we're going to be together. We're not going to be there.
I think the difference with the planning board, it's been my experience that typically liaisons don't participate in the meeting. The reasoning for that is because we do not need to have an opinion before it comes to our table. And so while we may have an opinion, we don't share it out in a public forum like that. So I think the planning board and board of adjustment are two different conversations, but these other committees are sort of working in progress committees, and a lot of times, I will tell you, participating in discussions and stuff, but not in voting and not in the other decision part of it, has been how it's always been. When I was on forestry, I used to do forestry and beautification before I did now, so I can just tell you, and those have always been part of that. Because I go out and work. We go out on the cleanup. I go out on the cleanup days. And
so I'm not sure I'm tracking. So when you go to a forestry meeting, because you're the liaison, you get to speak at the meetings.
If I need, I generally don't.
But you can.
But I can, and if there's something that I think, then
But
I would.
if you're on the planning board and you go to a workshop, liaisons do talk at the workshops, and they're talking directly with developers.
They do very few workshops, and not typically, that used to be the model a long time ago, but that's not, or not a long time ago, but since I've been on the board, that was a model, yes. But in the past several years, that's not been how it's been. And in fact, the planning board now really doesn't do too many of those three people. They do some, but it really depends on what the project is that they're working on.
Well, when they do them, when those meetings do occur, whenever they occur, I'm not proffering that they should not speak or they should speak. I'm just suggesting that we put it in writing whether you can speak. That's what I'm trying to figure out, because I've been to the workshops as the third wheel and watched aldermen speak. And so I know they're speaking to developers because the guy was sitting right next to me. So the question is that if we want them to, if we want the liaisons to do that, we should say that, put it in writing, and then there's no question about that. Then the next step of that whole process, as Robert has laid out, is if there's only one liaison, either present or there's only one liaison, does the second alderman who happens to show up, do they have the right to speak? Because in workshops, the public does not get the right to speak, and currently, depending on which group you're in, they consider you just part of the citizenry. The question that I have is, should that second person, once again, I'm not advocating one way or the other, but whatever it is, I think we should have it in writing so people aren't saying, well, they got away with this and this got away. No, this is the rules, and this is what we're doing, which is the whole purpose of the ad hoc committee. Go ahead, Mark.
It's to twist a metaphor two ways. We seem to be spinning our wheels because it looks like there are different things that would apply to different boards and committees. So that's one thing. And the other is, do we need to reinvent the wheel? I told you I was going to twist this metaphor. I mean, are we the only municipality that has liaisons to boards and committees? I kind of doubt it. Why don't we see what they do and what their policies are?
I look more for autonomy and independent thought in those things, so I would rather not have our liaisons influencing the meetings. Now, I know when you get to beautification and things, but in terms of meetings and participating once they start or stop, I would rather be sitting in the corner listening and not influencing that meeting with my personal opinion. And I don't want the liaisons in the planning board to be influencing during the meeting. And they don't, that I've ever seen. So maybe we can get a standard where it's just minimal.
That is what my whole goal of having this conversation is to see if there's some standard we should put in writing that the board, not me, that the board agrees these are the rules that the liaison should have. And so that's all I'm going down the road for.
Well,
Is the issue that what we're kind of circling around, is the issue whether or not liaisons can influence or be perceived to be influencing activities and decisions by boards and committees, or is it an issue of how to communicate between the boards and the alder?
It's both. It depends on the issue. If the issue is a board's not acting, is not being productive in the mind of the liaison, there's some schism there. There's some issue that is not, the thing's not working correctly, then what is the liaison's job to do? Is it to come back to the board and say, listen, my observation is X, and this is getting, we're not, the thing that we created over here is not working correctly, usually it's because of humans, and so what do we do? What do we collectively do with that issue? That should be part of your response. Your responsibility is not just to watch the chaos go on, your responsibility is to do something about it. And I'm not suggesting that you stand up and independently tell the world what your particular thoughts are. I think that's a board issue to come back to the board. Maybe we have to work in a closed session. I don't know. The problem is that those people aren't considered employees, so can you have a closed session? I'd have to figure that part out because I'm not smart enough on that. But there's other things that we should put in writing that we have an expectation, we, the board, have an expectation if you're sitting on that you're going to do something.
I think one of the things we talked about was if you're in a meeting, something very pertinent is in that meeting, then we have a mechanism to get that back to the entire board here. You and I sit on the planning board. We just sit there and listen. And a lot of times somebody else shows up. Seen Alderman Mosteller right there on a couple of occasions. We just sit there and listen. But if something very important comes up, we need to have some mechanism to get that back to us so that we can already be considering it.
I think that is one of the most important parts of this liaison conversation. We get thrown into this with some understanding of what the expectation is, but not a complete understanding. And having a uniformed way to provide the information, certain things that you should include, and even just sending a copy of the agenda. I know we can go search, but just send a copy of the agenda of what was discussed. Right, so there's certain things that I think we can agree. A liaison shows up, they sit there, they either participate or don't, which we need to decide how we feel about that. But then what we get back within 7 days is somewhat uniformed no matter which of us is providing the information. And then when we leave office in 2 years, what is the next person going to do? They're going to pick up exactly where we left off to get the same and provide the same documentation in a uniformed way. So the idea is uniformed, although it's going to be off a bit, but the expectation will be the same.
So it sounds like within 7 days of a meeting to which you are a liaison, you would include a copy of the agenda and a brief highlight reel for what happened during the meeting. I mean, it's not minutes because that's too in-depth, but whatever maybe the 1 or 2 top topics were, you send that over. Everyone else has a copy of the agenda. They can look at that, and if there's something else of interest, you can go to the minutes and figure that out from there.
Or back to that board liaison to ask questions about a specific agenda item. But at least then this is what was on the agenda, and this is that person's highlights.
All right, I like your template. I like your template idea. And I say we make it easy. Sarah, you remember me in your interview. Here's first example. We make some kind of a form so that you're sitting in that meeting. You take a picture of this. You fill out the form with whatever questions you want to have. You hit submit. It's populated to all of us. We get a report instantly. No replies, just one way. And then it's on the public, well, it's in our whatever, a message board or whatever you want to have. And so we're instantly notified as soon as that person hits the button. If you want to give them 7 days, great. But in terms of filling out a form, let's don't do that. Let's make it real easy. Let's put it on the phones that are provided and put it in the process. First time.
Any other comment on this topic, please? Okay, let's move on to the next one. The public policy, a public-private contribution project. This is still a thing in the works, okay? So we've had these programs go on before in the city. Everybody's trying to do the right thing, trying to get something done for the city. And we had collections of monies taking place. And we had no rules and regulations on how we collected it, what obligations we put on the collector, where the money was held, how long the money was held, what form was the money, were you taking cash? And then when we do a public-private partnership, who's the lead? And I'm going to suggest that the city's always the lead. If we're going to be held responsible at the end of the day, we got to be the lead. So we are the lead for managing the money. That would go through the manager to the finance officer, that part. I'm suggesting that there's a way that once you've given your contribution, that the city comes up with a mechanism that you can go into City Hall, show your ID, and I want to see if my money actually made it to the fund. What, sir?
I don't know that we can do that with the Freedom of Information Act. So well, if someone asks for a list of everyone who has donated to the water tower, I think legally we're obligated to provide that list. So I don't think there's a way that we can say you can't come. You can't.
I'm just saying there's a policy that tells people you can do it. I think if I walked in to City Hall and said, I want to see if my money was there. If you want me to fill out a FOIA or whatever we call them in the state, yeah, I agree with you on that. But that we actually say that you can come in, as opposed to, can I do that? That was my point. Is that you can only see yours, unless you're going to fill out the form to do the other.
Are we saying that we would not accept anonymous donations?
I don't know how you would get an anonymous donation into an account. Are they going to give me cash? There'd have to be a check or some kind of transfer of money, so they're not that anonymous. Anonymous just means that the city is not telling the rest of the world, though I'm not sure that would up. I think Robert's point is push came to shove, we would have to announce the anonymous. But I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm the end-all and be-all on FOIA knowledge. But there's an issue there that we would have to explore. But as an example, the other day, yesterday, I guess it was yesterday. It seems like many years ago, we had a group that wants to do the right thing, and they were going to go out and file for grants, and they were going to put down things to get money for a project that was on city property. I'm not sure that that's where we should be, that independent groups are directing how city property is going to be used, or the policy of how that's going to happen, that I encourage the public-private partnership. I encourage them to come to meetings and talk about it. But if there's a grant going forward for a project that is on city property, I think the city is the one who's applying for the grant as opposed to the individual. So that, because it's a policy issue of how we're going to, what we're going to do with the city property. And so those little things that we have done, we've done it because everybody was trying to do the right thing. We have to change the thing. We still are going, I'm not advocating we don't collaborate with the citizens. I'm just saying that there has to be a typical, or not typical, an accepted policy that the finance officer isn't going to walk up to us and say, what in the world were you thinking? Not that Lance would ever do that, but.
Yeah, well,
But-
he looks like he might. One of the a great example, though, or Alderman Davis, is the kind folks that want to restore Franklin Square. They're collecting money. Let's say they collected money. Maybe they're not. Well, they want to be a
To be clear, they're not even an organization. They don't have any kind of status. I have advised them that before they can get 501c3 status, they actually have to be an organization filed with and established with the State Secretary of State.
Okay,
I mean,
bad
they
example.
have to be an organization. They're not an organization.
Bad example. There are other organizations in the community today raising money for projects that are city-owned projects.
DSI.
I don't know if that's an example, but the one that I have in my mind, they're collecting money on behalf of the city. And
Who is it?
well, let's say hypothetically that the Friends of Franklin achieve 501 and start to collect money to donate directly to the city. And then someone comes and says, you know what, I decided that I don't want to use my money for that purpose. I'd like to move it somewhere else. And they come to the city to say, I'd like to move my money somewhere else. The city doesn't have their money. We have no accounting of their money. We have one payment that came from a nonprofit. We need to have a better understanding, like the mayor suggested, of who's managing the money.
Yeah, sure.
So that's the example where, you know.
Way back, let's go back into the mist of history. Hurricane Matthew tore up the old city dock, and I happen to live very close to that, and so I know that a number of my neighbors immediately said, we can fix that dock. And they collected money and they gave it to the city. I think it amounted to something like $9,000 to pay for the city to get the materials, and then they were going to go out with their hammers and tongs and whatever else and fix that darn dock. Well, didn't happen, and I still get my ear chewed on from time to time. Where's my money?
This whole process, if the board agrees that that's what they want to do, would eliminate that.
Thank you.
So we would have rules and regulations. You know, we're going to have to lean on the manager and the finance officer for some of the minutia to put in there and how we manage that, because I'm not smart enough to do that. But I do know that the way that we've done it now in the past allows for the perception of bad things to have happened.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because in almost all cases, the people that were involved in this were trying to do the right thing for the city. Now we just have to bring modern policies to that. So my purpose here today on this one issue, since we haven't built anything out for anybody to vote on yet, is just to get a consensus whether or not this is a good thing, a good road to go down, to build out something for you later to look at, to say, I like that, or I don't like that, let's tweak this. And so that the three of us, when we're working on this, are not going down a road that you just ultimately is going to fail. There's no sense spinning our wheels for that. So that's where I'm looking for, just kind of a consensus.
I think what we were trying to do is just, somebody had, they made a contribution. They wanted to be able to, okay, show me the money. Yeah, I gave you the money, where is it? what mechanism do I have to come in and say, okay, I gave you $2 or $100,000, where is it? And let's say the project has been drawn out. We thought it was going to get done in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's out here 6 months or a year. What are you doing with my money? Is it sitting there? Show me what account it's in. That way I can know that it's actually there for what I intended the money to be or to be used for.
I think that's part of it, but it's also parts of like, do we collect cash? Personally, I'm giving you cash and you're giving it to him the cash and her the cash, and how much cash, and cash is just tough. But that's a board decision. But the manager has a couple of thoughts.
No, I just wanted to say, you do not ever want to put a citizen in a situation where they're taking cash for a city project. Because if anything happens, well, I mean, you read it in the headlines all the time. Somebody's arrested because they've taken all the money. So don't let the residents get in that kind of a situation. And the policy is a good one. I think it's something that's needed. And we won't even, everything comes to the city, no matter what city project it is. And then it'll be Lance and I that will go to jail instead. But don't ever put residents in that situation. It's not a good thing.
I think, yes, I'm in agreement. We need to move forward, and I think we need to move forward quickly. We've got Franklin, we've got the Friends of Franklin, we've got the city courthouse, we've got Taylor Field. So when you look at all of these things that are public-private partnerships, we need to rein in and gain control over what that process looks like.
And so at the 30,000-foot level, we've thrown out here already, but I just want to make sure we got consensus on this. If there's a public-private partnership to do whatever it is, that the city is the lead for it, the city is the finance lead for it, and the city is the messaging lead for it. Because the messaging is the policy that this board or the manager made so that we understand what that all is. That's at the top level, and then we'll have the staff help us with filling in those blanks. That's where I'm going on it.
And in your synopsis here, it identifies the school of government. The school and government has a blueprint for this, so it should be a relatively simple thing to create.
Yeah, I reached out to them, and they don't really have a policy, but they gave us some thoughts about things that they felt that should be in there.
This blog is...
Yeah, that's what I meant. They sent that to us, so we kind of did some copying there.
Okay, so any other comments on this? So the last thing that's on the agenda is
I had one more thing to say about that, if I may. What about DSI? Now, this is an organization that raises money and uses money to do things around town on public property. How do we deal with that?
They would be under the same rules as everybody else.
And what they do, and I don't want to speak for DSI since nobody's here, but DSI actually does these functions to raise money, then they donate to the different things. They're not raising money for the new school that's owned by the city. Do you know what I'm saying? They're a nonprofit business. You probably know more about it, Rebecca, than I do, being a business owner downtown. But they raise money with functions so that they can donate. And one of the big charities is us, but it's not usually for a specific item for us.
Well, the only issue the only thought I would have on that is not an issue, thought, is that before they were raising money for something that had to do on city property, that they would get the okay from the city that if we actually want to do that. See my point? I don't want them raising money because they think it's a great idea, but we have no intention of doing it because of some other reason. Correct. They would be governed by this set of rules that the city, not us, not 7 of us, but the city governs the messaging, the policy, and how the money is moved back and forth. It would be no different.
The thing I think about are the directional blue signs, like the sign that's in Franklin Square. I think they contributed those. So they gave them to us, we accepted them, they're not theirs, we put them on our property, we take liability or whatever for them. That's independent.
In the future, I would expect them to say, we want to make signs up, and is this match the city color scheme or whatever it is? In other words, we just don't have people just building things and throwing them out there.
That actually came from a city study, and then they donated the money for it. So that's what I'm saying to you. They're a nonprofit that raises money for civic stuff, but they don't identify, generally speaking, I don't believe they've identified, oh, we're going to build this or do this. And then they allocate their funds based on what projects meet their goals, I think is how it works.
So this would fold right into their program. It would there shouldn't be much of an issue at all for that. Okay?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw this out there, and I haven't really wrapped my head around it yet, but I'm not sure how our DSI and the 4th of July Festival similar in that way. I don't know the answer to that. I just haven't thought it through.
It's something we can discuss further and try to put some more meat on that. And there may be some caveats we have to put in this stuff. All right, the last issue is the one that we added to the agenda, and that is the topic of the legislative proposals. And it struck me yesterday that we had not socialized this with the whole board, and we're on a timeline to get it to Raleigh so they can look at it. So there's 5 things on this sheet of paper. Do you all have a copy of this? Okay. Yeah, I am. Thank you. Because I'm benevolent, and Bonnie was nice enough to make it up.
These were some that were given from each of you. If you emailed them to me, I added them on.
I'm going to ask us to take a 5-minute break while you read this so that Alderman Kelly can come back. Okay. And number 5 is 900,000, not 90,000.
Well, except that Chief Drew got new quotes, and it's 600. He got an updated quote for today, and he just emailed it, so it's 600,000. And let me just say, if the state doesn't come up with the money, we have to. We have no answers here. That's it.
And that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to bring it here, because it could actually play a big role into our budget discussions. Meeting's back in session. The last item we're going to talk about is the legislative proposals. I just want to make one observation, or two observations of information that I was provided. One is that Senator Rayburn at the 19 Mayors meeting gave a speech about the short session that we're in now and the limitations of doing that, both on legislation and on money, which apparently there's rules and regulations about what kind of legislation can be provided or initiated during a short session. Yet there were loopholes for each one of them, so it kind of got my head spinning. But we are somewhat limited on that. And the other one was, don't ask for a lot of money because there is not going to be a lot of money. And a reminder that Brunswick County got $200 million this past year. So it's not like we're not getting any money. So with that said, the first one on this sheet is a legislative proposal so that Southport can keep the fines from parking tickets that they write. If you write a parking ticket without this enabling legislation, the money goes to Literary Fund or someplace else. I got this idea from Oak Island when I realized that they had $1.2 million from their parking thing, and I asked if part of that was fines, and they said yes, and I asked how did they get to keep it, and they said you just have to file with your state legislator to ask for that. So there has been some preliminary discussion on that topic. It didn't seem like it was a big hurdle to get over, but Alderman Carroll, you seem to be having a question there.
No, I'm excited about it. I think it's a great idea. I would try to take it a step further because I had a conversation about the fines that we charge related to building, things like the fines we impose on the folks who cut their trees before getting a permit. So as we move forward, that might be something, because we don't keep that money either, is my understanding.
That has to do with civil penalties. You really need to talk to the attorney about that because I think that's a state statute conversation. I don't know how parking tickets relate to that.
It is, in fact, a state statute that we can get an exemption for. So there's enabling legislation to allow jurisdictions to do this, but you have to be added to the list, and only Raleigh can add you to the list. So
maybe
Representative Miller and Rabin would be involved in that.
Maybe Brady could answer Robert's question.
Right.
I believe speeding tickets also go to the state, not to us. I'm pretty sure. Do y'all know?
Wow, for round one, let's just try to get the parking tickets. Because whatever parking program we ever come up with, whatever the plan may be, it's never going to work without enforcement. No parking plan will ever work without enforcement. Are we in consensus for asking for that one? Okay. So the next one.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself from number 2.
Okay. The next one is to create legislation that allows Southport to increase the accommodations tax from 3% to 5%. Currently it's 3%, and so you can read this all, what the additional 2% would be for. So the question I have for all of you is this something we want to push forward for this legislative session, which is an election year?
What I was going to say is, because this is what I sent in, was that other towns are doing this, and once they meet a threshold, then it will bubble up. So I think it's good for us to do this, to add our voice to being able to do this. And since the short session is really just a legislative session, that then I was advised that this might be a good thing.
It's not going to cost the state anything. Yeah.
It probably doesn't cost the state anything. I fully agree with you that my question, and I don't know the answer to this, is it best to do this, throw this into the hopper now, or is it best to go back and see if we can get consensus from any of the 19 other mayors in Brunswick County and present it all at one time?
These are all Oak Island has theirs. I think they can spend their 2% on sand. They're different caveats. This is per community. This isn't a county thing. This has to do with
So they already
tourism
have the
authority.
enabling legislation to
They
do
have,
this.
for what they want.
Right.
This is per community. This has to do with, the difference is we're allowed to charge 3% accommodations tax and utilize it toward tourism, but we're not defined. If we went to the 5%, which we could, but we'd have to create a tourism authority. There's a lot of other conversations about that. That's why this conversation sort of changes that. That's what the state statute is now. But this would be enabling, if we could get this, it would be enabling legislation that gave us a variation of what is now statute. And we could get the 2% and use it.
Let me ask you to refine in my head. There's enabling legislation now that allows it to go up to 5%, is that correct? We just don't have, we're not signed
No.
onto it?
It's not that.
Okay.
It's done by community. So there's not a statewide legislation
Correct.
that does that.
But there's enabling legislation to already, there's a piece of legislation on the books that says Oak Island can do this because we've
They
written
don't,
it.
their legislation isn't exactly, I know that they have different, they have something about sand that allows them to spend, because tourism, sand is part of their tourism, just like our infrastructure is
Okay.
part of our tourism. So it's really, I don't know, we've
Okay.
got to start, if we keep submitting it and other communities across the state are, then once it reaches a certain threshold, then they will act, the legislature will act.
For clarity, then, it's that by enabling, we mean that the state allows each municipality individually to come with a plan. Is that correct?
Well, that's not, any municipality can come with a conversation
With this kind
about
of
things.
plan.
But this plan would be saying, we want to go to 5%, and for that extra 2%, instead of spending it on tourism, direct expenditure of like increasing tourism, we're good with that.
We needed to support the tourism via the
The
infrastructure.
impacts, correct. And that's what we're trying to get at for us.
You're saying that it has to be aimed at a specific thing like Oak Island with the sand?
You know, Frank, I would say that's what we're doing here. So we need this legislation in order to be able to do this.
I agree with you.
Yeah. It's just another way to take a bite at the apple of infrastructure.
Any other thoughts on this whole thing? Any strong disagreement on it? So would you mind if we put this into the legislative package that would go to Raleigh now, and that the city take up this banner with a further discussion with the other mayors to see what they're doing and try to buy some support?
Sure, they each have their own spin on their own
Right.
thing, but yeah.
Well, they may also have it better wording. They may have something.
Well, I think
understand the
this, we weren't told to give the legislative wording. I think the legislature would do their own wording.
They would, but they, I'm trying to get us to socialize more with the other mayors and the other jurisdictions to see best practices of how we do things. This would still go forward the way it is written now, okay? Okay. All right, so I'm hearing consensus on that, okay? All right.
Well, the consensus is that we're going to ask for, we're going to send this
Right.
to the legislature.
Correct.
And then how we deal with that afterwards is
Correct.
something else.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is Southport to put a sales tax for meals and beverages on the November referendum to see if voters would approve this.
Yes.
So I don't know that we need, I'm not sure that we need legislation to do that. The only thing we'd have to make sure that, I think the referendum thing says we can have non-binding referendums. Are you, Mark, did you write this one? Okay.
I did.
Okay,
It's my understanding that we have to get the state's approval before we can put that on the agenda.
That is correct.
on the
Yes,
referendum.
that is correct.
Okay.
You can't just put it on referendum.
Okay.
I would refer to it as the prepared meals tax and not a sales tax.
Okay, prepared meals tax, okay.
Meals and prepared meals and beverages. Prepared meals and served beverages tax.
I think they just refer to it, the legislature just refers to it as a meals tax, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's what those people in Raleigh will help us do. We'll put it in the right wording, whatever it is.
Whatever is the right way.
there, yes. Okay, we have consensus on that. Now, $1 million for Taylor Field Inclusive Playground and $900,000 for the fire department.
You
We're
probably,
gonna have to figure out which one you're gonna prioritize. The
On
fire
my-
department, well, the fire
on my-
department now is down to $600,000.
Yeah.
But the fire department has to get done.
On my list, the fire department is a priority. Only one above Taylor Field, but it's a priority.
Right.
So,
Do I,
you have major bipartisan support on that money
Okay.
right there.
so if we only could get to one, if we were advised to pick one or the other, that would be the number one, the fire department one. Is that correct? Because if
The fire department has to. We don't- it's not a choice.
Because if we don't do this by next July, right now, they're gonna turn off our radios. So if they don't give us the money, which we would not know until probably June or July of this year, which is after our budget cycle, we would have to come up with the $600,000 to do this.
Both, ask for both. Ask for
Fire
both.
department.
Yeah,
Fire department, sorry. The fire department is an essential. You got to have that. I mean, you get all kinds of, I don't even know how to put it, but you got to have that one. Taylor Field is a nice to have. But the fire department, in my opinion, takes top priority.
The fire department will get their radios, and we will get the $1 million. Ask for both.
I agree. I also think we should go into this budget cycle, including the radios. We've got to look at worst case scenario, and we know that we've got $1.2 million shortfall. I'd like us to go into this budget looking at what that looks like and including things like the radios.
We can do that, but I'm hoping that way before we're finished with the budget cycle, we'll get some kind of wording that it's, you're in or you're out from Raleigh. But looking for Plan B ahead of time is a good plan. Yeah. Did you have something, Mark? Okay.
The only thing, and I don't know this, and maybe this is something you could ask our legislators before we hand them something, is since we know that this session, I'm just going on what you just said earlier that Senator Raven said about money and all of that conversation. If I kind of think we're looking at things for the short session because that's what's immediately, and that's the deadline you're trying to do. And I don't know how, but I just want to make sure. I suspect if there was a loophole, they'd be able to find it for the fire department. I'm not so sure about $1 million for a playground because they fund PARTIF, they do all these other things, and the playground is, they're looking at private funds now. There'll be other opportunities to try to seek that money. So just whatever, you make
That's why I was
that
asking for the priority.
Yeah,
Start
just
off
make
with
that
900,000
decision
and
with the
see, and then
legislators.
put them both in there, but put the 900,000 first, because we absolutely need that stuff.
As long as it doesn't muddy the waters, yeah.
Correct.
I mean, not that, because we want that, but the other one, as long
I
as it doesn't
understand.
muddy the waters.
The radios are important. Put them as your priority. but I know that Representative Miller has been lobbied hard on those radios, hard. So that was one of those things that I'm sure. And then again, we have strong bipartisan support of Democrat and Republican leadership that will probably allow this $1 million.
For the fire department, just to keep it in perspective, the entire state of North Carolina is in the same pickle.
Yes.
Every little burg doesn't have the money for the radios. So if they're going to fund Southport, they're probably going to look to see how they can fund other departments. And then that comes up to the bigger number, and how much money are they taking away to do this critical thing and what's left over for anything else. But we prioritized, and that was what I was looking for, so that we it's just not my thought process that's being thrown into this.
And now it's not 900, it's 600. That's good.
And wasn't the playground 750? I just wondered why we were asking $1 million.
There is talk about also, remember, yeah, you were at the luncheon, a disabled bathroom area, and also some closer parking area, so they added the money on. Roughly, yeah.
Only one of the five is asking for any money, and it's money that we are mandated to raise one way or the other, and that's for the radios. 1, 2, and 3 don't cost the state anything.
Well, the only thing that I would say to that is, you're correct, it doesn't cost them money, but it is an election year. And that can have a play into whether or not I want to be tagged with, not Rich Alt, if I want to be tagged with raising taxes on people who are going to vote for me. So that is a political issue that weighs just as heavily as money does.
When we're talking about the radios, that is critical. That's absolutely essential. That's a got to have. I mean, that's a situation where you could be saving lives or whatever. You got to have that. And, you know, we need to push on that however we can.
I apologize, I don't want to add on the list, but there is nothing here on 4th of July money. Is that something that is that nothing we're asking for this year from the committee to help with? No 4th of July? Okay, cool.
That might be something to throw into the hopper for next year. They should start thinking about that. If we're going to be the sponsor for the state, is there any money that can be had?
For several years, we've been asking and asking.
I'm not sure, Mark, that actually, how far up the food chain that ever got. So if that's something the 4th of July committee truly wants, we should have a discussion with all of us, and then we should then collectively, when we have our individual conversations with people, have a unified voice on that. More voices are better than one.
Sounds good.
Any other comments? I'll would accept a motion to adjourn. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much for a very productive meeting.